In the grand tradition of civilizations that have mastered faster-than-light travel, but somehow never figured out basic communication skills, the Zephyrian Empire had spent the last 3 centuries perfecting what military historians would later call strategic capitulation theory. It's a fancy way of saying they'd turned surrendering into an art form, complete with ceremonial white flags made from the silk of their homeworld's most venomous spiders, because apparently even their acts of cowardice needed to be unnecessarily dramatic. Admiral Korvash stood on the bridge of his flagship, the inevitable regret, watching his fleet of 300 warships drift through the outer edges of the Sol system like a collection of very expensive, very lost tourists. His 4 eyes, evolution had been generous with the Zephyrians, though clearly stingy with common sense, tracked the tactical displays showing human space ahead. 47 star systems had already surrendered to species they'd never actually fought, and Korvash intended to make it 48 before lunch. The logic was bulletproof, assuming bullets were made of tissue paper and fired by a nearsighted child. Why waste resources on actual warfare when you could simply acknowledge the inevitable and skip straight to the part where you handed over your lunch money? The Zephyrian Military Academy taught entire courses on preemptive defeat strategies and advanced capitulation techniques. Their most decorated generals were the ones who'd surrendered fastest. "Sir," chirped Sub-Admiral Thexry, her translator struggling with the concept of military confidence, "our scouts report unusual activity in the inner system. The humans appear to be engaging in combat?" Korvash's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Perfect timing. Nothing made surrender negotiations smoother than arriving while your future overlords were busy demonstrating their martial prowess on some other poor species. He'd learned that trick during the Great Zephyrian Surrender of 2387, when they'd capitulated to the hegemony right in the middle of what turned out to be a fireworks display celebrating someone's birthday. "Excellent. Begin recording everything for our surrender presentation. I want full tactical analysis of their combat capabilities." Korvash adjusted his ceremonial defeat sash, a garment that had seen more action than most Zephyrian weapons. "And prepare the white flags. The good ones, not the practice flags we used on the Andromedans." What Admiral Korvash didn't know, and really the universe seemed determined to keep him ignorant about most things, was that the combat his scouts were detecting was humanity's bi-weekly military exercise program. Specifically, Wargame Wednesday, an event that held roughly the same significance in human military culture as Casual Friday held in corporate offices, except with more explosions and significantly better catering. Commander Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of the UES Determination, watching her tactical display with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for defusing bombs or explaining cryptocurrency to parents. Around her, the bridge hummed with the controlled chaos of a military exercise in full swing. Officers calling out coordinates, tactical computers processing engagement scenarios, and someone in the back arguing about whether pineapple belonged on military rations. "Blue team, you're supposed to be the enemy fleet, not a tourist group," Elena announced into her comm, watching as Captain Morrison's squadron finally remembered they were meant to be shooting back. "Red team, excellent flanking maneuver, but next time try not to announce your attack vector over open channels. The enemy can hear you." This was Wargame Wednesday, humanity's weekly tradition of pretending to blow each other up in increasingly creative ways. What had started as routine military training had evolved into something resembling competitive theater, complete with scoring systems, post-game analysis, and heated debates about tactical decisions that would make sports commentators weep with envy. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, her tactical officer, looked up from his console with the expression of someone who just discovered something either fascinating or deeply concerning. "Commander, we're picking up some unusual sensor readings on the system's edge. Looks like, well, it looks like a fleet. A big one." Elena glanced at the readings, then shrugged. "Probably another training scenario someone forgot to mention. The military loved surprise exercises almost as much as they loved acronyms and coffee that could strip paint. Red team, execute pattern Delta 7, she continued, watching as her ships moved into formation with the kind of precision that came from doing this every week for the past 2 years. Blue team, respond with whatever Morrison calls tactical genius this week. What Elena couldn't see, and what would have probably made her laugh until she needed medical attention, was the effect this display was having on the Zephyrian scouts recording everything from their hidden positions. To alien observers who'd spent centuries studying the art of surrender, watching humans treat combat like a learning experience was roughly equivalent to discovering that your neighborhood librarian moonlighted as a professional wrestler. The humans were critiquing their own battle performance in real time, while still fighting. "Nice shot, Rodriguez, but your approach angle was sloppy," came over the comm channels that the Zephyrian scouts had helpfully tapped into. "Try coming in from below next time. The enemy won't expect an attack from their blind spot." "Copy that. Thanks for the tip, Williams. I'll remember that when I'm shooting at you next week." The aliens watched in growing horror as the humans began sharing tactical advice with their opponents, treating the entire engagement like some sort of collaborative educational experience. This wasn't warfare. This was something far more terrifying. This was a species that had turned combat into a social activity. Back aboard the inevitable Regret, Admiral Korvash was experiencing what his species called existential tactical vertigo, the queasy feeling that comes from realizing you've badly miscalculated the universe's power dynamics. His intelligence officers had been analyzing the human combat footage for exactly 17 minutes, which in Zephyrian military terms qualified as exhaustive research. "Admiral," Subadmiral Thexery's voice carried the tremor of someone who just peeked behind the cosmic curtain and found something unspeakably horrifying. "We've completed our preliminary assessment of human warfare capabilities." The main display lit up with tactical breakdowns that would have impressed a paranoid conspiracy theorist. Red arrows pointed at human ship movements, energy signatures were analyzed down to the subatomic level, and communication intercepts were dissected with the enthusiasm of literature professors finding hidden meaning in grocery lists. "They're not just fighting," Thexery continued, her four eyes blinking in sequence like a broken traffic light. "They're teaching each other how to fight better." Mid-battle, the defeated vessels immediately begin planning improvements for their next engagement. Korvash felt his ceremonial defeat sash suddenly seem inadequate for the occasion. In 3 centuries of preemptive surrendering, he'd never encountered a species that treated warfare as continuing education. The recordings showed human commanders actually thanking their opponents for successful attacks, as if getting shot was some sort of professional development opportunity. "Sir, there's more," another intelligence officer chimed in, because apparently the universe wasn't done making Korvash question his life choices. "They've initiated a second combat exercise while the first one is still in progress. 2 separate battle groups are now engaging in simultaneous war games using completely different tactical doctrines." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle humming of life support systems and the quiet sound of Korvash's worldview crumbling. Humans weren't just conducting military exercises. They were running multiple training scenarios simultaneously, treating their entire star system like some sort of cosmic military academy where the final exam never ended. "They're stress testing their own strategies," whispered the sensor operator, staring at his displays with the wide-eyed expression of someone watching a natural disaster unfold in slow motion. "Look at this. They're deliberately creating tactical disadvantages for themselves to see how they adapt." The tactical display showed human forces splitting their fleets, handicapping their stronger units, and even broadcasting their intended maneuvers to their opponents just to make things more challenging. It was like watching someone play chess while blindfolded, with one hand tied behind their back, against multiple opponents, while explaining their strategy to everyone in the room. "They fight for sport," Korvash breathed, his mandibles clicking with the rhythm of impending doom. "This isn't warfare preparation. This is recreational combat optimization." The final straw came when Zephyrian linguists decoded a human transmission that roughly translated to, "Great exercise, everyone. Same time next week. Jenkins is bringing those little sandwiches again." The realization hit the bridge like a meteor made of pure, concentrated dread. Humans scheduled their warfare practice like book clubs. Admiral Korvash straightened his defeat sash and made the only logical decision available to a rational military commander faced with a species that had weaponized continuous improvement. "Prepare the surrender broadcast. Full ceremonial pro." Apologies, I meant protocol. And someone find our fanciest white flag. We're going to need it. Commander Elena Vasquez was in the middle of explaining why Blue Team's pincer movement looked more like a confused hug when her communications officer interrupted with the expression of someone who'd just received a message from either aliens or her mother, both equally unpredictable and potentially problematic. Commander, we're receiving a transmission from, well, it's either a very elaborate prank or we've got visitors. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Korvash in all his four-eyed, ceremonially sashed glory, standing before what appeared to be the galaxy's most expensive collection of white flags. His translator worked overtime as he launched into what sounded like a formal speech written by someone who'd learned diplomacy from surrender manuals. Greetings, terrifying humans of the Sol system. I am Admiral Korvash of the Zephyrian Empire, commanding a fleet of 300 vessels currently positioned at the edge of your domain. After witnessing your horrifying displays of casual military supremacy, we formally surrender our entire civilization to your obviously superior tactical genius. Elena blinked, then blinked again. Around the bridge, her officers were displaying the full spectrum of human confusion, from Lieutenant Webb's dropped jaw to the communications officer's slow head tilting that suggested his brain was attempting a full reboot. We accept your surrender? Elena ventured, because proper military protocol probably covered this situation somewhere in a manual she'd never bothered to read. Although I should mention, we were just conducting routine training exercises. The effect of this statement on Admiral Korvash was immediate and dramatic. His mandibles began clicking rapidly while his four eyes performed what could only be described as a synchronized panic dance. Training? That was training? You mean your actual military capabilities are even more advanced than what we observed? Well, no, that's pretty much it, Elena replied, because honesty seemed like the safest policy when dealing with aliens who'd apparently traveled across the galaxy to surrender to her Tuesday practice session. Although Jenkins does make excellent sandwiches for post-exercise debriefing, what followed was the kind of diplomatic conversation that would later require an entirely new category in first contact protocols. The Zephyrians, it turned out, had built their entire military philosophy around the assumption that warfare was something civilized species avoided at all costs. Discovering humans who treated combat like a hobby had fundamentally broken their understanding of galactic power structures. 6 months later, the Zephyrian Empire had become humanity's most enthusiastic military allies, primarily because they developed an obsession with human tactical doctrine that bordered on religious devotion. They attended every Wargame Wednesday like eager students, took detailed notes on human strategic discussions, and had started their own surrender-themed cooking shows featuring Jenkins' sandwich recipes. Admiral Korvash, now sporting a human-style military uniform and an honorary degree in applied tactical studies, had become something of a celebrity in Zephyrian space for his brilliant decision to surrender before anyone got hurt. His autobiography, How I Accidentally Conquered Fear Through Strategic Capitulation, became a bestseller across 17 star systems, and Elena Vasquez, she still ran Wargame Wednesday every week, though now with an audience of enthusiastic aliens who cheered at particularly clever tactical maneuvers and had somehow convinced the military to upgrade the catering budget. Because apparently the fastest way to galactic peace was convincing everyone else that humans treated warfare like a competitive sport with really good snacks. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. It just took 300 alien warships and a very confused admiral to prove it.